So, ma'am, how do you see contemporary English poetry in the country today?
Well, I don't know about the country, but I do believe that in certain uh, places, maybe in the universities where they have these co-curricular activities, they do hold poetry reading sessions at the university level. Maybe at the school level, I don't know, but at the university level, they do have poetry reading sessions. And I think places like Delhi or Kolkata, they do have these sessions. So it's very encouraging that students do come together and have these sessions. So, but that is missing, I think, in Patna.
So,
I think poetry is alive all over the country. Unfortunately, there is no common platform that is made available for poets from various parts of the country, not even various parts of a given region, to come together and share their creativity. At the university level, again, there are certain universities which do encourage the reading of poetry, the writing of poetry, the sharing of poetry. But very unfortunately, we are living through very difficult times because of the structure of the academic curriculum, and particularly the semester system, which has been an unmitigated disaster for the pursuit of any of the finer human endeavors outside the specificities of an oppressive curriculum. That has been a bit of an obstacle. But if we're looking at poets, whether they belong to the deepest of the hinterland, they do express themselves. And now it's become a lot easier to let people know of the kind of work that is going on because of the social media itself. So the social media has played a fairly important role on the acknowledgement and the spread of poetry. But having said that, we must also remember that the major genre in literature today is the novel, and more recently, non-fiction, which in many ways seems to have swamped the reading of poetry. And poetry is a difficult discipline. It's easier possibly to write prose, not necessarily prose of a very high quality, but it's easier to write prose. So we all seek conveniences in our creativity as well, and probably that is one of the reasons for the decline of poetry.
so what was the environment like in your times when you were there as students, say in late 70s, early 80s? I mean, the present condition seems a bit less than satisfactory.
Yes.
Well, in my time, since I was in women's college, Patna Women's College, a lot of competitions used to be held for elocution, and so that would encourage the students to come forward. And in fact, I too used to participate while I was a student in Patna Women's College. So we used to have these elocution competitions in different languages, not only English, but in Bangla, in Hindi, Urdu, and these competitions used to be held on a very regular basis. So as a result, and of course the students, our batchmates and our peers, they were the part of the audience. And I remember as students we used to look forward to participating in these competitions. And when I was a teacher there, a young teacher, then too, I'm talking about the 70s. And there's a lot of activity going on, but there were very few inter-college competitions.
So
So
presently, this has also deteriorated. I mean, the use of competitions to encourage students, and do you think there is a deficiency in the syllabus uh, as far as the creative aspects of literature are concerned? I mean, we have a lot of things that we get to read, but to stress upon the creative instincts of a person, to say make him develop like a writer, is there a deficiency in the syllabus?
See, because of the given time constraints and because we've been
it's talking in the present
straitjacketed,
times.
completely
Mm.
straitjacketed into leading very repetitive and monotonous mechanical lives, a large element of the creativity is perhaps getting lost. Uh, I remember when I was a student in college, I think every adolescent claimed to be a poet. And the claims were sometimes not really wild because they did write good poetry. Although the object of the writing was probably a girl and fairly unattainable on many an occasion. But still that spurred, a certain degree of creativity. But now you see what has happened is the whole situation is one where the very notion of a human being has changed completely into the notion of a subject within a grammatical construct. So I really doubt if the human subject as such remains a human subject. And you cannot have too much of a creative interaction between nouns and pronouns and adjectives. I think that has taken a huge toll on the very notion of creativity.
Ma'am, what do you feel is the reason for this loss of humanity in the subjects and this general loss in the interest? I mean, the times that we are living in are very inspiring in certain ways. They are, if I may say so, corrupt enough to make a person write something or to make a person react. They are violent times. So why they are not people who are who are not writing actually, who are not expressing themselves? Is there a muffling of voices that is happening at some level?
I think the education system and the examination system is largely to blame, because I find that students are only interested in scoring high marks, and as one of my colleagues has said again and again, that they are Marxist because they are interested in Marx. So they want to gain marks, and they make use of short term, their aim is a short term gain. So as long as they get their marks by hook or by crook, it's a very strong phrase that I'm using, they are only interested in marks and not interested in the art form per se. So they couldn't be bothered. They don't have the feel for the language. They don't have the feel for literature. They are only interested in studying just enough to get, and that too they depend on guess questions. So there is really no interest, and if they do choose English as a subject, it's because they haven't got into any other subject.
So how do you feel that we can recreate what is lost in a way that the loss of space that is there? And what do you feel about the memory of it? I mean, are the coming generations going to retain what was there? If one can be very optimistic and say the glorious past that had at least a culture of reading, if not their own, somebody else's poems to each other.
I am not a believer in the golden age and the past. It's a very simple thing. When you drive, you look through the windshield. You don't look at the rear view mirror. The best that you can do if you drive with looking at the rear view mirror is probably crash. So, I do believe that time is not necessarily linear. Time is a continuum, and therefore a tradition carries itself forward, and we are all inheritors of a tradition. So that is, genetically in an artistic sort of a way built into every individual. Yes, it is absolutely necessary that in our troubled times, and let's see, and I don't really know that if you scan the last 5 years or 6 years of India, its politics, its society, if you look at, let us say, the death of Rohit Vemula on the one hand, if you look at what is happening in the university campuses and the deliberate attempts that are made to stifle all forms of dissent and dialogue, and to create a deliberate democratic deficit, as Noam Chomsky calls it, we are not going to build a society that is healthy and open. And while poetry does also flow from moments of grave crisis, after all, I'm sure Rohit Vemula's death itself has been a source of inspiration for poets. But then there are other kinds of crises that we've been through. Let's say the hundreds of scams. Now, I don't think much poetry has been written on scams. All right. When you look at things such as police action, like the kind that we have had very recently in Bhopal, where the government wishes to absolve itself from all the responsibilities pertaining to basic human rights, I don't know how much of poetry can be born out of that. These initiatives that are made, and I think instead of looking for everybody to come together at a particular point in time, the smaller individual initiatives could obviously be looked at, and let us not look at poetry which can only come out of the university campuses. Poetry can also flow from the tea stalls. So to maybe go out, initiate a dialogue at the street level, at the village level, and just encourage people to express themselves any way they like. I mean, if they do not express themselves like an A.K. Ramanujan, for example, or an Aga Shahid Ali, for instance, it does not matter. As long as you have the courage to bare your soul, you have the makings of a poet.
There may be people who are writing in their mother tongue or in the regional languages, not necessarily English. So,
Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.